3 months after completing her community service hours, Elena had established a routine of volunteering at the legal clinic every other Saturday. Her work there had evolved from basic client assistance to helping develop new programs that connected legal services with broader community safety initiatives. The opportunity she had been waiting for came on a Tuesday morning when Commander Chen called her into the office with unusual urgency. "Elena, we have a situation developing that requires both your security expertise and your community connections," Commander Chen began, spreading out files on her desk. "The intelligence services have identified credible threats against Judge Harold Mitchell. Someone has been sending increasingly specific threats related to his sentencing decisions." Elena felt a complex mix of emotions hearing Judge Mitchell's name. The judge who had dismissed her work as playing dress-up now needed the protection of the very organization he had criticized. "What's the nature of the threats?" Elena asked, reviewing the file documents with professional detachment. "Initially just angry letters about harsh sentences, but they've escalated to specific threats about his home address and daily routine. The most recent message included details about his morning jogging route and his wife's volunteer schedule at the hospital. Someone is conducting surveillance." Elena studied the threat analysis and security assessment. Judge Mitchell lived in an upscale neighborhood with limited natural security features. His routine was predictable, and he had always refused personal protection, believing it was inappropriate for judges to appear isolated from the communities they served. "Has he agreed to accept security protection?" Elena asked. "Reluctantly. He's insisting on minimal visible presence because he doesn't want to seem intimidated or unapproachable. But the threats are serious enough that we can't take chances." Commander Chen looked at Elena directly. "I'm assigning you as primary protection coordinator because you have both the tactical expertise and the community relationships that might help us provide security without disrupting his judicial work or community connections." Elena accepted the assignment with mixed feelings. Professionally, she was qualified and willing to protect any citizen facing credible threats. Personally, she couldn't forget Judge Mitchell's dismissive comments about her competence and dedication. "When do we begin?" Elena asked. "This afternoon. Judge Mitchell has been briefed and expects to meet with you at 2 o'clock to discuss security protocols." Elena spent the morning reviewing Judge Mitchell's case files, looking for patterns in his sentencing decisions that might explain the threats. She also researched his background, judicial philosophy, and community involvement. Judge Mitchell had indeed built a reputation for harsh sentences, particularly for repeat offenders and white-collar criminals. But he had also been a strong advocate for drug court programs and alternative sentencing for first-time offenders. His judicial record suggested someone who believed in accountability but also in redemption when circumstances warranted. At 2 o'clock, Elena arrived at Judge Mitchell's chambers in the courthouse. She wore her dress Royal Guard uniform, wanting to project both professionalism and authority. Whatever personal feelings existed between them, this was an official protection assignment that required clear communication and mutual respect. Judge Mitchell looked up from his paperwork as she was announced by his clerk. He appeared older than Elena remembered from their courtroom encounter, with more gray in his hair and deeper lines around his eyes. The stress of receiving death threats was clearly affecting him. "Captain Vasquez," he said formally, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "I understand you've been assigned to coordinate my security protection." "Yes, Your Honor. I've reviewed the threat assessment and would like to discuss security protocols that will provide adequate protection while allowing you to maintain your judicial responsibilities." Elena had prepared carefully for this conversation, focusing on practical security matters rather than their previous interaction. But she could sense tension in the judge's demeanor that went beyond normal concern about personal safety. "Captain, I need to address our previous encounter before we discuss security matters," Judge Mitchell said unexpectedly. "My comments during your court appearance were inappropriate and unprofessional. I let my frustration with privileged defendants cloud my judgment about your individual case." Elena was surprised by the directness of his acknowledgement, but she maintained her professional composure. "Thank you for saying that, Your Honor. I'm here in my professional capacity to ensure your safety, and our previous interaction won't affect the quality of protection you receive. I appreciate that. But I think you should know that I've learned more about the nature of Royal Guard work since our courtroom encounter. My comments about civic responsibility and playing dress-up were based on ignorance, not knowledge. Judge Mitchell stood and walked to his office window overlooking the courthouse steps. I've been doing some research into executive protection and government security work. I had no understanding of the training, expertise, and responsibility involved in your position. Elena remained seated, unsure where this conversation was heading but willing to listen. More importantly, Judge Mitchell continued, I've learned about your volunteer work at the community legal clinic. Jennifer Walsh contacted me last week about a case where your research had helped them identify precedents that saved a family from wrongful eviction. She spoke very highly of your analytical skills and dedication to helping people understand their legal rights. Elena realized that the judge had been making inquiries about her beyond their courtroom interaction. This level of personal research suggested he had been genuinely troubled by his behavior during their previous encounter. The clinic work has been very rewarding, Elena replied carefully. It's given me insights into how legal institutions affect people's daily lives. Jennifer mentioned that you've been instrumental in developing new programs that connect legal services with community safety initiatives. She described your work as building bridges between different types of public service. Judge Mitchell returned to his desk and sat down, looking directly at Elena. Captain Vasquez, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you recognition that you understand civic responsibility better than I initially gave you credit for. Your willingness to serve in multiple capacities demonstrates exactly the kind of commitment to community welfare that our public institutions need. Elena felt a complex mix of vindication and professional satisfaction, but she remained focused on the immediate security requirements. Your Honor, I appreciate your comments, but my primary concern right now is ensuring your safety. We can discuss community service philosophy after we've addressed the immediate threats. Of course. What do you need from me? Elena spent the next hour reviewing Judge Mitchell's daily routine, travel patterns, and security vulnerabilities. She identified several areas where simple changes could significantly reduce his exposure to potential threats without dramatically disrupting his judicial responsibilities. The most immediate concern is your morning jogging routine, Elena explained. The threats specifically mentioned your route and timing. We need to vary both significantly until the threat source is identified. I've been running the same 5-mile loop for 15 years, Judge Mitchell replied. It's important for my mental and physical health, especially given the stress of this job. I understand that, but predictable routines create opportunities for people with bad intentions. We can develop alternative routes that provide similar exercise benefits while reducing security risks. Elena had anticipated this resistance and had prepared several options that would maintain the judge's fitness routine while addressing security concerns. Her presentation demonstrated the thorough planning and flexibility that characterized professional executive protection. Your Honor, I also recommend temporary modifications to your home security and courthouse arrival procedures. Nothing dramatic, but enough to disrupt any surveillance that might be ongoing. They spent another hour discussing specific security protocols, emergency procedures, and communication requirements. Elena found herself impressed by Judge Mitchell's willingness to accept reasonable security measures once he understood their necessity and rationale. Captain, I have a question that goes beyond immediate security concerns, Judge Mitchell said as they concluded the briefing. Jennifer Walsh mentioned that you've been working on initiatives that connect legal services with community safety. I'm curious about how you see those relationships developing. Elena realized this was an opportunity to discuss ideas she had been developing through her clinic work and Royal Guard experience. Your Honor, I've observed that many community safety issues stem from people not understanding their legal rights or not having access to proper legal guidance. When people feel powerless within legal institutions, they sometimes make choices that create security problems. She continued, at the same time, security professionals often focus on enforcement without understanding the underlying social and legal factors that contribute to the problems they're addressing. There's potential for much more effective collaboration. Judge Mitchell looked intrigued. Can you give me a specific example? The Riverside neighborhood where the clinic is located has been experiencing increased property crime. Traditional security responses focus on patrol presence and rapid response to incidents. But clinic work revealed that many property crimes stem from landlord-tenant disputes where people don't understand their legal options for resolving conflicts. Elena warmed to the topic, drawing on months of experience working with both security analysis and direct legal assistance. If we could develop programs that provide legal education and early intervention for housing disputes, we might prevent some property crimes before they occur. Security resources could then focus on genuine criminal activity rather than problems that stem from lack of legal knowledge. That's a sophisticated analysis, Judge Mitchell replied. It suggests that effective judicial work requires understanding community conditions, not just legal precedents. Exactly. And effective security work requires understanding social contexts, not just tactical responses to immediate threats. Their conversation was interrupted by a call from Elena's radio. Command was requesting an update on security protocols and timeline for implementation. Excuse me, Your Honor, Elena said, responding to the radio call with crisp professionalism. Protection detail is in place and protocols have been established. Primary will maintain position until evening shift replacement arrives. Judge Mitchell watched Elena coordinate with her team, observing her efficiency and authority in managing the security operation. When she finished the radio communication, he looked at her with obvious respect. Captain, watching you work reminds me how wrong my initial assessment was. This is clearly complex, skilled work that requires both tactical expertise and diplomatic sensitivity. Elena appreciated his acknowledgement, but remained focused on her professional responsibilities. Your Honor, my team will position themselves discreetly around the courthouse for the remainder of today. We'll escort you to your vehicle this evening and coordinate with protection at your residence. Understood. Captain, would you be willing to continue our conversation about community safety initiatives once this immediate security situation is resolved? I think there might be opportunities for collaboration between judicial and security approaches to community welfare. Elena was intrigued by the possibility but wanted to maintain appropriate professional boundaries. I would be interested in discussing those ideas in an appropriate forum. Perhaps through official channels that could include other relevant agencies and organizations. As the afternoon continued, Elena coordinated security details while Judge Mitchell conducted normal court proceedings. She positioned herself strategically in the courtroom, monitoring for potential threats while observing the judge's interactions with defendants, attorneys, and court staff. Elena noticed that Judge Mitchell's reputation for harshness was only part of the story. She watched him explain legal procedures patiently to defendants who didn't understand court processes. She observed him asking thoughtful questions about defendants' circumstances before determining appropriate sentences. His approach was firm but not dismissive of the human factors involved in each case. During a brief recess, Elena overheard a conversation between Judge Mitchell and a public defender about a young defendant facing drug possession charges. Your Honor, my client is willing to enter a treatment program if that's available as an alternative to incarceration, the attorney said. I've reviewed the pre-sentence report, Judge Mitchell replied. This appears to be addiction-related rather than criminal enterprise. I'm willing to consider drug court if your client demonstrates genuine commitment to treatment. Elena realized that Judge Mitchell's judicial philosophy was more nuanced than his reputation suggested. He was indeed strict about accountability, but he also recognized when alternative approaches might be more effective than traditional punishment. That evening, Elena escorted Judge Mitchell to his car and verified that residential security was properly coordinated. As they walked through the courthouse's secure parking area, Judge Mitchell continued their earlier conversation. Captain, I've been thinking about your observations regarding community safety and legal services. I deal with many cases that might have been prevented if people had better access to legal guidance before problems escalated. What kinds of situations do you see most frequently? Elena asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. Landlord-tenant disputes that turn into property damage or trespassing charges. Family disputes that escalate to domestic violence. Small business conflicts that result in theft or vandalism accusations. Many of these cases involve people who made poor choices because they didn't understand their legal options. Elena recognized these as exactly the types of situations the clinic encountered in early stages, before they had escalated to criminal charges. Your Honor, the clinic sees many of those same issues, but we encounter people while they still have non-criminal options for resolving their problems. There might be opportunities for early intervention programs that prevent problems from reaching your courtroom. I'd be very interested in exploring that possibility. The justice system works best when it focuses on genuine criminal behavior rather than problems that could be resolved through education and mediation. They reached Judge Mitchell's car, where another Royal Guard member was waiting to escort him home. Elena conducted a final security check and confirmed radio contact with the residential protection team. Your Honor, this concludes the courthouse phase of today's protection. Officer Martinez will escort you home and coordinate with the overnight security detail. Thank you, Captain. Your team's professionalism has been impressive. I feel confident that appropriate measures are in place. As Judge Mitchell's car departed with its security escort, Elena reflected on the day's interactions. The judge's willingness to acknowledge his previous mistakes and express genuine interest in her community work had been unexpected. More importantly, their conversation had revealed potential opportunities for collaboration that could benefit both judicial effectiveness and community safety. Over the following weeks, Elena continued coordinating security protection while the investigation into the threats proceeded. The work required careful balance between providing adequate protection and allowing Judge Mitchell to maintain his judicial responsibilities without appearing intimidated or isolated from the community. The investigation eventually identified the threat source as a recently released prisoner who blamed Judge Mitchell for his extended incarceration. The individual was arrested before any actual violence occurred, but the security operation continued until prosecutors were confident the threat had been neutralized. During those weeks, Elena and Judge Mitchell had several opportunities to discuss their shared interests in community safety and justice system effectiveness. Their conversations evolved from professional courtesy to genuine collaboration on ideas for bridging security and legal services. Captain, I've been reviewing case files with your observations in mind, Judge Mitchell told her during one of their security briefings. I estimate that 30% of the cases I see might have been prevented with early intervention and proper legal guidance. That matches what we're seeing at the clinic, Elena replied. Many of our clients come to us after problems have already escalated, but still before they've reached criminal justice system. What would it take to reach people earlier in the process? Judge Mitchell asked. Elena had been thinking about this question throughout her clinic work and security duties. It would require much better coordination between different types of public services. Legal services, social services, community policing, and even security agencies all encounter people at different stages of problem development. But those agencies don't typically communicate with each other until after problems become serious enough to require judicial intervention. Exactly. By the time cases reach your courtroom, multiple systems have failed to provide early intervention that might have prevented criminal behavior. Their discussions continued over several weeks as the security operation gradually scaled down. Judge Mitchell proved to be a thoughtful collaborator, bringing judicial perspective to Elena's ideas about community safety while learning about security and legal service approaches he had never previously considered. The threat investigation concluded successfully with the arrest and prosecution of the individual responsible. Judge Mitchell was able to return to normal routines, though he maintained some of the security awareness practices Elena had taught him. On the final day of the formal security detail, Judge Mitchell asked Elena to meet with him one more time to discuss their ongoing conversations about community safety initiatives. Captain, our collaboration during this security operation has been enlightening for me in multiple ways, he began. I've learned about the complexity and professionalism of security work, and I've gained insights into how different public services might work together more effectively. Elena appreciated his acknowledgement and was curious about where he intended to take the conversation. I've been discussing our ideas with colleagues in the judicial system and with representatives from other city agencies, Judge Mitchell continued. There's genuine interest in developing pilot programs that provide early intervention before problems reach the criminal justice system.
What kind of programs are you envisioning? Elena asked.
Community justice centers that would combine legal services, mediation, social services, and community policing in single locations. People could access multiple types of assistance before problems escalate to the point where criminal charges become necessary. Elena realized that Judge Mitchell was describing something similar to ideas she had been developing through her clinic work, but on a larger scale with official government support. Your Honor, that sounds like exactly the kind of integrated approach that could make a real difference.
What would be the next steps for developing such programs?
The City Council has agreed to fund a pilot program if we can demonstrate effective collaboration between agencies. I've been asked to chair a planning committee that would include representatives from courts, police, legal services, social services, and community organizations. Judge Mitchell looked at Elena directly.
Captain, I'd like to invite you to serve on that planning committee.
Your experience bridging security and legal services would be invaluable for developing effective programs. Elena was honored by the invitation but wanted to ensure that her participation would be appropriate given her Royal Guard responsibilities. Your Honor, I would be very interested in contributing to such an initiative. I would need to coordinate with my superiors to ensure that my involvement was consistent with my official duties and didn't create any conflicts of interest. Of course. I would expect your participation to be in your capacity as a community safety professional rather than as a Royal Guard representative, unless your organization chose to participate officially. Elena realized that Judge Mitchell was offering her an opportunity to contribute to exactly the kind of systemic change she had been envisioning through her clinic work and security experience. I'll discuss this with my commander and let you know about my availability.
Thank you for considering me for such an important initiative.
As Elena left the courthouse for the final time as Judge Mitchell's protection coordinator, she reflected on how dramatically their relationship had evolved. The judge who had once dismissed her work as playing dress-up was now seeking her expertise for developing innovative approaches to community safety and justice. More importantly, their collaboration had demonstrated that apparent conflicts between different types of public service often stemmed from misunderstanding rather than genuine philosophical differences. When security professionals and judicial officials took time to understand each other's work, they discovered shared goals and complementary expertise.
That evening, Elena met with Commander Chen to discuss Judge Mitchell's invitation and its potential implications for her Royal Guard career.
Elena, this sounds like an excellent opportunity to apply your skills in new contexts while maintaining your primary responsibilities here, Commander Chen said after reviewing the proposal.
Community safety initiatives that prevent problems from escalating could ultimately make our security work more effective.
I was hoping you would see it that way, Commander. The experience would certainly provide insights that could improve my professional effectiveness. I'm supportive, with the understanding that your Royal Guard duties remain your primary commitment. If you can balance both responsibilities effectively, this could be a valuable professional development opportunity. Elena left the meeting with authorization to participate in the Community Justice Planning Committee, subject to ensuring that her primary duties remained her top priority. Over the following months, Elena worked with Judge Mitchell and representatives from multiple city agencies to develop the pilot Community Justice Center program. Her experience bridging legal services and security work proved valuable for designing programs that addressed problems before they required criminal justice intervention. The planning process was challenging, requiring careful coordination between agencies with different cultures, priorities, and operating procedures. But Elena's analytical skills and ability to communicate across institutional boundaries helped the committee develop innovative approaches that respected each agency's expertise while creating new collaborative possibilities. 6 months after their first courtroom encounter, Elena and Judge Mitchell stood together at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the city's first community justice center. The facility would provide integrated legal services, mediation, social services, and community policing resources in a single location designed to help people resolve problems before they escalated to criminal behavior. Captain Vasquez, Judge Mitchell said as they prepared for the ceremony, "I want to thank you for your patience with my initial ignorance and your willingness to work with me despite my inappropriate behavior during your court appearance. Your Honor, we both learned from that experience.
Sometimes conflicts lead to better understanding if people are willing to move beyond initial impressions.
I've certainly learned that effective public service requires much more collaboration and mutual respect than I previously understood. Your work has shown me that security, legal services, and judicial functions are much more interconnected than our institutional structures typically recognize. As Elena watched families entering the new Community Justice Center for assistance with housing disputes, immigration questions, and other legal concerns, she reflected on the unexpected journey that had begun with a simple traffic citation. Judge Mitchell's harsh treatment and dismissive comments had initially felt like unfair criticism of her dedication and competence. But his willingness to acknowledge his mistakes and learn from their interaction had created opportunities for collaboration that neither of them could have anticipated. More importantly, their work together had demonstrated that apparent conflicts between different approaches to public service often masked opportunities for more effective collaboration. When people took time to understand each other's expertise and perspectives, they could develop solutions that were more effective than any individual agency could achieve alone. Elena continued her Royal Guard duties with enhanced understanding of how security work connected to broader community welfare. She maintained her volunteer work at the legal clinic, now serving as a liaison between the clinic and the new Community Justice Center. And she worked with Judge Mitchell's planning committee to expand the pilot program to additional neighborhoods throughout the city. The traffic citation that had brought them together was eventually paid and forgotten. But the collaboration it had unexpectedly generated continued to benefit the community they both served, proving that sometimes the most challenging encounters can lead to the most valuable partnerships when people are willing to move beyond their initial assumptions and work together toward shared goals.
Judge Mitchell never again suggested that Elena was playing dress-up or lacking in civic responsibility.
Instead, he became one of her strongest advocates for innovative approaches to community safety and justice, frequently citing her expertise in discussions with colleagues and policymakers. And Elena never forgot the lesson that effective public service required not just individual competence, but also the humility to learn from critics and the courage to bridge institutional divides when doing so could benefit the communities they all served. Elena's second Saturday at the community legal clinic began with an unexpected crisis. When she arrived at 8 o'clock, she found Jennifer Walsh pacing in the parking lot, talking rapidly into her phone while gesturing at the building's front entrance. "I understand the situation," Jennifer was saying, "but we have 30 clients scheduled today and nowhere else to send them." She spotted Elena and waved her over.
"Can I call you back in 5 minutes? My volunteer just arrived."
Jennifer hung up and turned to Elena with an expression of controlled frustration.
"We've been locked out of the building.
The landlord claims there's a gas leak, but the timing is suspicious. We've been fighting him for months about renovations he wants to make. He's been looking for an excuse to terminate our lease." Elena walked to the front door and examined the posted notice. The paperwork cited emergency safety concerns and ordered immediate evacuation pending inspection by city utilities. But something about the documentation seemed off to her trained eye.
"When did you last smell gas in the building?" she asked Jennifer. "Never. Our heating is electric, and we don't have gas appliances."
The building next door has gas service, but we're completely separate utilities. Elena studied the notice more carefully, using her experience reviewing official documents and credentials. The letterhead looked legitimate, but the signature seemed rushed, and the emergency order number didn't follow the standard municipal format she had learned to recognize through her security work.
"Do you have the contact information for your utility company?" Elena asked.
Jennifer pulled out her phone and found the number. Elena called the utility company's emergency line and was connected to a dispatcher who checked their records.
"No gas leak reports for that address," the dispatcher confirmed. "No service calls scheduled either."
"If you're seeing a posted notice, you might want to contact the city building department.
This could be fraudulent."
Elena thanked the dispatcher and looked at Jennifer. The utility company has no record of any gas leak or emergency at this address. Jennifer's expression shifted from frustration to anger.
"That landlord is trying to force us out by posting fake emergency notices."
"This is exactly the kind of thing our clients face," but we usually help them fight it rather than experiencing it ourselves.
What do we do about our clients? Elena asked, watching as cars began pulling into the parking lot.
People were getting out and approaching the building, confused by the posted notice and locked doors.
Let me call our backup location, Jennifer said, already dialing.
The community center sometimes lets us use their conference room for emergencies. While Jennifer made arrangements, Elena approached the arriving clients to explain the situation. She found herself using skills from her Royal Guard training to manage the crowd and provide clear information under confusing circumstances. "Good morning, everyone," she called out, projecting her voice with military confidence. "I'm Elena, a volunteer with the clinic. We're experiencing a temporary building issue, but we're arranging an alternative location for today's services.
Please don't leave. We will still be able to help you."
An elderly man raised his hand. "I took 3 buses to get here for my appointment.
How do I know this alternative location is legitimate?" Elena understood his skepticism.
Many of the clinic's clients had been victims of scams or false promises. Trust had to be earned carefully.
"That's a very smart question," she replied.
"Jennifer Walsh, our director, is calling the community center now. She'll give you their phone number so you can call and confirm the arrangement yourself."
"We want you to feel confident about any location where you'll be discussing personal legal matters."
Over the next 20 minutes, Elena helped coordinate the transfer of operations to the community center 6 blocks away. She used her organizational skills to ensure all client files were transported securely, that appointments could continue on schedule, and that everyone understood the new location. The community center conference room was much smaller than their usual space, but the staff were welcoming and helpful. Elena found herself working more closely with individual clients as they adapted to the cramped quarters. Her first appointment was with Marcus Thompson, a veteran in his 50s who needed help appealing a denied disability claim. Marcus had served 2 tours in Afghanistan and was struggling with PTSD and physical injuries from an IED explosion. The Veterans Administration had rejected his disability application, claiming insufficient medical evidence. "I've got all the paperwork they asked for," Marcus told Elena, spreading out a thick folder of documents.
"Medical records, service records, statements from my commanding officers. But they keep saying it's not enough."
Elena reviewed the files, applying her analytical skills to understand the bureaucratic requirements. She had worked with veterans in her Royal Guard role and understood both military culture and the challenges of transitioning to civilian life. "Marcus, this medical report from the VA hospital is dated 6 months after your initial application," she observed.
"Did they ask you to get additional evaluations?"
"Yeah, but nobody told me that the new evaluation would replace my original documentation instead of supporting it. Now they're saying my symptoms aren't severe enough because I tested better after 6 months of therapy."
Elena saw the problem immediately.
The VA was using Marcus's progress in treatment as evidence that his condition wasn't serious, rather than recognizing that proper medical care had helped him cope with legitimate disabilities. "This is actually a common issue," Elena explained.
"The system penalizes veterans for getting better instead of recognizing that ongoing treatment needs indicate genuine disabilities. We need to reframe your application to show that your ability to function depends on continued medical support."
She spent an hour helping Marcus reorganize his documentation and prepare a supplemental statement explaining how his treatment had enabled him to manage his condition rather than curing it. Her security background had taught her to think systematically about complex problems, and she found those skills directly applicable to navigating bureaucratic challenges. "You really understand this stuff," Marcus said as they finished.
"Most people hear PTSD and either want to thank me for my service or act like I'm dangerous."
"You're treating it like a practical problem that can be solved with the right approach." Elena realized that her military-style training and her respect for Marcus's service background had created an immediate connection. She understood the culture he came from and could communicate in terms that made sense to him. Their next client was Rosa Martinez, a young mother facing eviction because her landlord refused to accept Section 8 housing vouchers despite claiming he would when she signed the lease. Rosa spoke limited English, so Patricia Morales translated while Elena researched housing discrimination laws.
This is illegal, Elena told Patricia after reviewing the relevant statutes. Landlords can't refuse Section 8 vouchers if they initially agreed to accept them.
That constitutes breach of contract and, possibly, discrimination based on source of income. Patricia explained the legal situation to Rosa, whose relief was visible. Like Mrs. Chin the previous week, Rosa had been afraid to challenge someone she perceived as having more power and knowledge than she did.
What's our next step? Rosa asked through Patricia.
Elena had been thinking about that question throughout the morning's cases. In her Royal Guard work, identifying a problem was only the beginning. The real challenge was developing effective solutions and seeing them through to completion. We can help you file a complaint with the city's Fair Housing Office, Elena explained. But that's a slow process, and you need immediate protection from eviction.
Let me research whether there are any emergency procedures that could buy you time while the discrimination complaint is investigated.
Elena spent her lunch break in the community center's small library, using their internet access to research emergency housing protections. Her investigative skills, developed through years of security analysis, proved valuable for navigating complex legal databases and finding relevant precedents. She discovered that the city had recently passed an ordinance providing temporary eviction protection for tenants filing discrimination complaints. The protection lasted up to 90 days while investigations were conducted, giving Rosa time to fight the eviction while also pursuing the discrimination claim.
This is perfect, Elena told Patricia and Rosa when they reconvened.
We can file both complaints simultaneously, and the discrimination complaint will trigger automatic eviction protection.
Rosa won't have to leave her apartment while this gets sorted out.
As they prepared the paperwork, Elena reflected on how different this felt from her usual work. In the Royal Guard, she typically worked to prevent problems from occurring. Here, she was helping people solve problems after they had already developed. Both approaches required careful analysis and strategic thinking, but the community clinic work felt more directly connected to individual human lives. The afternoon brought a steady stream of clients with various issues. Elena helped a teenager understand the legal implications of a minor traffic violation, assisted an elderly couple with Social Security benefits questions, and worked with a small business owner facing licensing disputes with the city. Each case reinforced her growing understanding of how complex the legal system could be for ordinary people. Laws and regulations that seemed straightforward to professionals became mazes of confusion for people without specialized knowledge or resources. Around 4 o'clock, Jennifer approached Elena with an update about their building situation. "I've been making calls all day," Jennifer reported.
The fake gas leak notice was definitely fraudulent. The city building department confirmed that our landlord has no authority to post emergency evacuation orders.
"But by the time we get the locks changed and the building reopened, it'll be Monday at the earliest."
"What about next Saturday?" Elena asked.
"That depends on how aggressively our landlord wants to fight this.
He might try other tactics to force us out.
The community center can accommodate us occasionally, but they can't provide permanent space for our operations." Elena found herself thinking about the problem from a strategic perspective, the way she would approach a security challenge.
The landlord was using intimidation and false documentation to achieve his goal of terminating the lease.
But those same tactics created vulnerabilities that could be exploited.
What would happen if media attention made it expensive for him to continue this harassment? Elena asked.
Public pressure sometimes motivates better behavior than legal threats alone. Jennifer looked intrigued.
"We've never tried that approach.
Most of our energy goes into direct client services rather than publicity campaigns." "I might know someone who could help," Elena said, thinking about her sister Maria's connections in the healthcare community and her own professional network.
"Let me make some calls."
That evening, Elena contacted Maria and explained the clinic's situation. Maria worked at the city's largest public hospital and knew reporters who covered healthcare and social services issues. "This sounds like exactly the kind of story that would get attention," Maria said.
"A landlord using fake emergency orders to shut down free legal services for low-income families?
That's both outrageous and newsworthy." Maria connected Elena with David Park, an investigative reporter who specialized in housing and community development issues. David was immediately interested in the story and agreed to investigate the landlord's background and business practices.
"I'll look into his other properties too," David told Elena.
"If he's using these tactics against the clinic, he might be doing similar things to residential tenants.
This could be part of a larger pattern."
Elena also reached out to Commander Chen, her Royal Guard supervisor, to discuss the situation. She wanted to ensure that her volunteer work didn't create any conflicts with her professional responsibilities.
"Elena, you're volunteering your personal time to help your community," Commander Chen said. "That reflects well on both you and the Royal Guard. As long as you're not using your official position inappropriately, you have my full support."
"I appreciate that, Commander. I've been careful to volunteer as a private citizen rather than as a Royal Guard representative."
"Good.
Keep me updated if the situation develops in any way that might affect your security clearance or professional duties." Sunday passed quietly as Elena researched legal precedents for landlord harassment and tenant rights. She found herself genuinely fascinated by housing law and the intersection of property rights with social justice concerns. The work engaged her analytical mind in ways that complemented her security responsibilities.
Monday morning brought news from David Park.
His investigation had revealed that Elena's instincts about the landlord were correct. "This guy has been systematically forcing out non-profit tenants from properties he wants to convert to higher-rent commercial spaces," David told her.
"The fake gas leak notice is just his latest tactic.
I found at least 3 other cases where he used fraudulent emergency orders to break leases with community organizations."
"Can the story run this week?" Elena asked. "I'm planning to publish Wednesday.
I'll need a comment from the clinic about how this affects their services, but I have enough documentation to make the case without putting your organization at risk." Elena shared this news with Jennifer, who was both excited and nervous about the media attention.
"We've always kept a low profile," Jennifer admitted. "Most of our clients prefer privacy, and we don't want to seem like we're seeking publicity."
"But the story isn't really about the clinic," Elena pointed out.
"It's about landlord harassment and fraudulent emergency orders.
The clinic just happens to be the most recent victim of a pattern of illegal behavior." Jennifer agreed to cooperate with the story, and Elena helped prepare a statement focusing on how the building lockout had affected clients who depended on the clinic's services.
Wednesday's newspaper featured David Park's investigation on the front page of the Metro section.
The story detailed the landlord's history of harassment tactics and included photos of the fraudulent gas leak notice. The clinic's situation was presented as part of a broader pattern affecting multiple community organizations. Elena read the article during her lunch break at Royal Guard headquarters. Her colleagues occasionally asked about her community service, but most accepted her explanation that she was completing volunteer hours required by a traffic citation. The story's impact was immediate.
By Thursday morning, the city building department had launched a formal investigation into the landlord's business practices.
The utility company issued a statement condemning the fraudulent use of their emergency notice format. And several other non-profit organizations came forward with similar complaints about harassment from the same landlord.
Most importantly for the clinic, the landlord's attorney contacted Jennifer to discuss resolving the lease situation amicably.
The unwanted media attention had made continued harassment more expensive than simply honoring the original lease agreement.
Saturday morning found the clinic back in its original location, with locks changed and full access restored.
Elena arrived to find Jennifer setting up the waiting area with obvious relief and satisfaction. "I can't thank you enough for your help this week," Jennifer told her. "Your idea about media attention was brilliant, and your research skills made all the difference in documenting our legal position." "I enjoyed the problem-solving aspect," Elena replied honestly. "It felt good to use my analytical skills for direct community benefit."
Elena's first client of the day was Mrs. Chen, returning for a follow-up on her housing situation.
The elderly woman's confidence had grown considerably since their first meeting, and she brought good news. "The housing authority inspected my apartment," Mrs. Chen reported through Patricia's translation. They found 16 code violations and ordered my landlord to make repairs within 30 days. He also has to pay a fine for retaliating against me for complaining.
Elena was pleased to see Mrs. Chen's transformation from fear to empowerment.
But she also realized that the clinic's victory was part of a larger pattern. When people understood their rights and had access to proper legal support, they could effectively advocate for themselves against much more powerful adversaries. The morning continued with regular client appointments, but Elena noticed that word had spread about the clinic's successful fight against their landlord.
Several new clients mentioned hearing about the clinic through news coverage of the building lockout story.
During lunch, Elena sat with Jennifer and Patricia to discuss the increased demand for services.
We're getting twice as many calls for appointments, Jennifer explained.
The publicity helped people realize we exist, but it's also creating capacity problems.
We simply don't have enough volunteer attorneys to handle all the requests.
What would it take to expand your services?
Elena asked.
More funding for staff attorneys and a larger facility, Jennifer replied.
Right now we're entirely dependent on volunteer lawyers who can only give us a few hours per month.
If we could hire even one full-time attorney, we could probably double our case capacity. Elena found herself thinking about the clinic's funding challenges as she worked with afternoon clients. The organization was clearly providing valuable services that helped people navigate complex legal problems. But, like many nonprofits, they struggled with the constant challenge of raising sufficient resources to meet community demand.
That afternoon, she helped a young couple prepare for bankruptcy proceedings after medical bills from their premature daughter's hospitalization had overwhelmed their finances.
Despite both parents working full-time jobs, they couldn't keep up with payments for medical care that insurance had only partially covered.
We feel like failures, the husband told Elena.
We both have good jobs and we've always paid our bills on time. But when Isabella was born 3 months early, everything changed. Elena reviewed their financial documents and medical bills, applying her analytical skills to understand their situation. The numbers told a clear story: responsible people facing circumstances beyond their control.
You're not failures, Elena told them firmly.
You're parents who did everything possible to save your daughter's life. The bankruptcy system exists exactly for situations like this, where people face financial hardships due to medical emergencies. She helped them organize their documentation and explained how bankruptcy would affect their credit and future financial options. Her ability to break down complex information into understandable terms helped them feel less overwhelmed by the process. As the day ended, Elena reflected on how much she had learned during her weeks at the clinic. The experience had given her insights into how legal institutions affected ordinary people's lives. But, more than that, it had shown her how her skills and training could be applied in different contexts to serve her community. Jennifer approached her as she was gathering her belongings. Elena, I know you'll complete your community service hours next week, but I hope you'll consider continuing with us. You have a real talent for this work, and you've already made a significant difference for our clients. Elena looked around the clinic's main room, where volunteers were cleaning up from another busy day of serving people who needed help understanding their rights and options. The work was meaningful and challenging, but it also represented a commitment that would require balancing with her Royal Guard responsibilities.
I'd like to continue, she said finally.
Maybe not every Saturday, but regularly enough to maintain relationships with clients and contribute to the organization's work.
This experience has been incredibly valuable for me, and I think I can provide value in return.
As she drove home, Elena realized that Judge Mitchell's harsh treatment had led her to something she would never have discovered otherwise. His attempt to diminish her work and suggest she lacked understanding of civic responsibility had instead deepened her engagement with her community in ways that made her more effective in her professional role. She understood now that protection and service meant more than just physical security.
It also meant ensuring that people had access to the tools and knowledge they needed to advocate for themselves in complex institutional systems. But Elena also couldn't forget the judge's dismissive attitude toward her professional work.
His comments about playing dress-up reflected a broader misunderstanding about the nature of public service and the expertise required for different types of protective work. Tomorrow she would return to her Royal Guard duties with new insights about the community she served. But she also found herself wondering whether there might be opportunities to bridge these different aspects of public service in ways that could benefit both her professional effectiveness and the broader community's well-being. That evening, she called Maria to update her on the week's events. "You sound different," Maria observed. "More engaged, like you found something that really excites you." "I think I have," Elena replied. "The clinic work has been challenging in ways I didn't expect. It requires many of the same analytical skills I use in security work, but applied to helping individuals solve immediate problems rather than preventing large-scale threats." "Are you thinking about changing careers?" "No, I love my work with the Royal Guard. But I am thinking about how these different types of public service might complement each other. There might be ways to apply what I'm learning at the clinic to make my professional work more effective." Elena spent Sunday planning how she might balance ongoing clinic work with her Royal Guard schedule. She also found herself researching the intersection of community policing, legal services, and public safety, looking for models that integrated different approaches to community protection. Monday morning's Royal Guard briefing included discussion of a series of break-ins in the Riverside neighborhood where the clinic was located. Commander Chen was reviewing security protocols for potential threats to government facilities in the area. "The pattern suggests organized activity rather than random crime," Commander Chen explained. "We're coordinating with local police to increase patrols and monitor for any escalation toward more serious targets." Elena listened with new interest, understanding now that the Riverside neighborhood was more than just a location on security maps. She knew families and individuals who lived there, people whose daily lives would be affected by increased crime and enhanced police presence. After the briefing, she approached Commander Chen with a request. "Commander, I'd like to volunteer for any community liaison work related to the Riverside security situation. My volunteer work there has given me contacts and relationships that might be valuable for community-based prevention efforts." Commander Chen looked intrigued. "Elena, that's an interesting application of your community service experience. Let me think about how we might incorporate community relationships into our security planning." As Elena returned to her office, she realized that her clinic experience was already beginning to influence her professional perspective. She was seeing security challenges through a broader lens that included community relationships and individual circumstances. But she also knew that Judge Mitchell's original critique still rankled. His suggestion that her work was somehow less important than other forms of public service reflected misunderstandings that went beyond personal opinion. There were institutional and cultural biases that needed to be addressed if different types of public service were going to work together effectively. Elena began to formulate an idea that would require careful planning and diplomatic skill to execute successfully. But if she could pull it off, it might address both her desire to continue clinic work and her frustration with the broader misunderstanding of what different public servants actually contributed to community welfare. The plan would require perfect timing, thorough preparation, and probably a bit of luck. But Elena had spent years executing complex operations under pressure. This challenge was different, but not necessarily more difficult than what she had handled before. She began making notes about what would be required to turn her growing idea into practical action. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble steps of the High Court of Justice as Captain Elena Vasquez adjusted her crimson ceremonial uniform one final time. The gold braiding caught the light, and her polished black boots reflected the towering columns of the courthouse. At 28, she had earned her position as the youngest captain in the Royal Guard through merit alone, but today she stood here for entirely different reasons. The traffic citation crumpled in her gloved hand felt like a joke. Speeding while responding to a security threat at the palace. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had been racing to investigate reports of suspicious activity near the East Gate when Officer Michael Garrett had pulled her over 3 blocks from the palace grounds. Despite her credentials, despite the emergency nature of her mission, despite showing her official Royal Guard identification, he had written her the ticket anyway. "Ma'am, emergency or not, you were doing 60 in a 30 zone, Officer Garrett had said with a smirk that suggested he enjoyed catching someone he perceived as privileged. Nobody's above the law. Elena hadn't argued. She had accepted the ticket, completed her security sweep, and discovered the suspicious activity was nothing more than tourists taking photos.
But the citation remained, and palace protocol demanded she appear in court rather than simply pay the fine. The Crown's legal department insisted that any traffic violation involving Royal Guard personnel be handled with full transparency to maintain public trust.
Now she stood in courtroom 7B, watching as Judge Harold Mitchell reviewed her case file.
Judge Mitchell had a reputation that preceded him.
25 years on the bench had earned him respect and fear in equal measure. He was known for his sharp intellect, his intolerance for excuses, and his belief that justice should be blind to privilege or position. Elena had researched him the night before, reading news articles about his career, his rulings, and his philosophy.
"Captain Vasquez," Judge Mitchell said without looking up from the paperwork.
His voice carried the weight of authority earned through decades of legal experience. "You stand accused of exceeding posted speed limits by 30 miles per hour while operating a motor vehicle within city limits."
"How do you plead?"
"Guilty, Your Honor," Elena replied clearly. Her military bearing was evident in her straight posture and confident voice.
"I was responding to a potential security threat."
Judge Mitchell finally raised his eyes to meet hers. He was a man in his early 60s with graying hair and sharp blue eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses.
His expression showed no hint of being impressed by her uniform or position.
If anything, he seemed slightly annoyed.
"Captain Vasquez, I see from your record that this is your first traffic violation.
I also see that you hold a position of considerable responsibility within our government.
However, I want to make something very clear."
He leaned forward slightly. "Your position grants you no special privileges in this courtroom. The law applies to everyone equally, regardless of whether they protect royalty or sweep streets."
Elena nodded. "I understand completely, Your Honor. I'm not seeking special treatment."
"Good," Judge Mitchell said, making a note on the file.
"Because you won't receive any. The standard fine for this violation is $400.
However, given that you chose to endanger public safety while speeding through residential neighborhoods, I'm increasing that to $800. Additionally, you'll complete 20 hours of community service." A murmur ran through the small gallery. Elena remained perfectly still, accepting the judgment without visible reaction. But Judge Mitchell wasn't finished. "Furthermore," he continued, "I find it troubling that someone in your position would show such disregard for the safety of ordinary citizens.
Perhaps if you spent less time playing dress-up and more time learning basic civic responsibility, incidents like this could be avoided." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. Playing dress-up.
She had trained for 6 years to earn her position. She had survived selection processes that eliminated 90% of candidates. She held advanced degrees in criminal justice and international security. She spoke 4 languages and had completed specialized training in executive protection, tactical operations, and diplomatic security.
Her uniform represented years of sacrifice, study, and dedication.
But she said nothing. Military discipline ran too deep to allow an emotional outburst in a court of law. $800 and 20 hours of community service, Judge Mitchell repeated.
Payment is due within 30 days.
Community service must be completed at an approved organization within 60 days.
Next case. Elena stepped forward to the clerk's desk to receive her paperwork.
Behind her, she heard Judge Mitchell call the next defendant, a young man charged with petty theft. She noticed that the judge's tone was considerably softer when addressing him. As she walked toward the exit, Elena caught fragments of conversations from people in the gallery. Some seemed to agree with the judge's harsh treatment, muttering about privileged government workers getting what they deserved. Others appeared sympathetic, recognizing the unfairness of the situation. But Elena focused straight ahead, maintaining her professional demeanor until she reached the courthouse steps. Outside, she pulled out her phone and called Commander Sarah Chan, her direct superior and head of Royal Guard operations.
"Elena?" Commander Chen's voice was crisp and professional. "How did it go?" $800 fine and 20 hours of community service, Elena reported.
The judge also felt it necessary to comment on my commitment to public safety and suggest I was playing dress-up.
There was a long pause.
Commander Chen had served 20 years in the Royal Guard and had risen through the ranks during a time when women faced even greater skepticism about their abilities. She understood the particular sting of having one's professionalism questioned.
"I'm sorry, Elena.
That was uncalled for and unprofessional. The citation was legitimate, but personal attacks have no place in a courtroom."
"It's fine, Commander. I can handle it." "I know you can. But you shouldn't have to. Look, take the afternoon off.
Complete your community service when you get a chance, pay the fine, and put this behind you."
One judge's opinion doesn't define your career or your value to this organization.
Elena appreciated the support, but the sting remained. As she drove back toward the palace, she found herself thinking about Judge Mitchell's words.
Playing dress-up.
As if her uniform was a costume rather than a symbol of earned authority and responsibility. She had encountered skepticism before. When she first applied to the Royal Guard, some questioned whether she had the physical strength for the role. During training, instructors had pushed her harder than her male counterparts, expecting her to prove herself daily. When she was promoted to captain, whispers suggested she had received special consideration due to diversity initiatives rather than merit. But she had answered every challenge with performance. Her fitness scores ranked in the top 5% of all Royal Guard personnel. Her marksmanship ratings were exceptional. Her tactical assessments and security analyses had prevented 3 potential threats in the past year alone. She had earned respect through competence, not connections. The Royal Guard headquarters occupied the entire north wing of the palace complex. The building blended classical architecture with modern security features, creating an atmosphere of both tradition and efficiency.
Elena's office was on the 3rd floor, with windows overlooking the training grounds where new recruits practiced formations and emergency procedures.
She spent the rest of the afternoon reviewing security protocols and updating threat assessments. The work required intense concentration, analyzing intelligence reports and coordinating with various law enforcement agencies.
It was detail-oriented work that demanded expertise in multiple areas of security science.
Around 5 o'clock, her phone buzzed with a text from her younger sister Maria, a nurse at the city hospital.
"Heard about court today. Want to grab dinner and talk?"
Elena smiled for the first time since leaving the courthouse. Maria had been her biggest supporter throughout her career, celebrating every promotion and defending Elena's choices to family members who questioned why she had chosen such a demanding and potentially dangerous profession. They met at a small Italian restaurant near the hospital. Maria arrived still wearing scrubs from her shift, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. The sisters shared the same determined brown eyes and strong jawline, but Maria's expression was always softer, more openly emotional.
"So tell me what really happened," Maria said after they had ordered. "Your text was pretty brief."
Elena described the morning's events, including Judge Mitchell's comments about playing dress-up.
Maria's expression grew increasingly angry as the story continued. "That's completely unprofessional," Maria said.
"You were doing your job, responding to a potential threat. Yes, you were speeding, but judges have discretion."
"He could have been reasonable about the circumstances."
"It's not about the fine or the community service," Elena replied.
"It's the attitude. The assumption that what I do isn't real work, that I'm just wearing a fancy costume and pretending to be important. You protect members of the royal family. You coordinate security for state visits. You've stopped actual threats. How is that not real work?" Elena shrugged. "Maybe he's right. Maybe I have gotten too comfortable in my position. Maybe I do need to remember what regular civic responsibility looks like." Maria leaned forward.
"Elena, don't let one bitter judge make you question your value. You've worked incredibly hard to get where you are. You've sacrificed relationships, missed family gatherings, and dedicated your entire adult life to this career.
Don't let someone who knows nothing about your actual responsibilities make you doubt yourself."
They talked for another hour, with Maria sharing stories from the hospital that reminded Elena that challenging authority figures existed in every profession. But, as she drove home to her apartment near the palace, Elena found herself still thinking about the judge's words. Her apartment reflected her personality and profession. The furniture was minimal but high quality, chosen for functionality rather than decoration. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with texts on security theory, criminal justice, international relations, and military history. Her diplomas hung in simple frames, along with commendations from various operations. That evening, she researched community service options, looking for organizations that would allow her to complete her hours while potentially learning something valuable. She found several possibilities: a literacy program for adult learners, a job training center for ex-offenders, and a community legal clinic that helped people navigate the court system. The legal clinic intrigued her. Located in one of the city's lower-income neighborhoods, it provided free legal assistance to people who couldn't afford attorneys. The website showed photos of volunteers helping clients with housing disputes, immigration questions, and minor criminal matters. It seemed like meaningful work that would give her insight into how the justice system affected ordinary citizens. She filled out the volunteer application online, noting her educational background and work experience. The application asked about her motivation for volunteering, and she wrote honestly about wanting to better understand the community she served and to gain perspective on civic responsibility. The next morning brought a return to routine. Elena arrived at headquarters at 6:30 for the daily briefing. Commander Chen reviewed the day's schedule: 2 diplomatic meetings requiring security details, a visit from foreign dignitaries later in the week, and ongoing analysis of potential threats identified by intelligence services. "Elena, you'll coordinate security for the German trade delegation this afternoon," Commander Chen said. "Standard protocol, but their economic minister has received some threatening letters from environmental groups." "Nothing specific, but maintain elevated awareness." Elena spent the morning reviewing files on the German delegation, studying their schedules, background information, and any potential security concerns. This was exactly the kind of work Judge Mitchell had dismissed as playing dress-up. The research required understanding international relations, threat assessment, and careful coordination with multiple agencies. Lives depended on getting these details right. The German delegation arrived at 2 o'clock. Elena positioned herself strategically in the palace's East Reception Hall, coordinating with 6 other Royal Guard members to ensure comprehensive coverage. She monitored radio communications, tracked the movement of all personnel, and maintained awareness of every entrance and exit. The meetings proceeded without incident, but Elena noticed several moments where her training and experience proved essential. She recognized a reporter who wasn't on the approved media list and discreetly had him removed. She spotted a catering employee acting nervous and verified his credentials before allowing him to continue. She identified a potential sightline that could pose a security risk and repositioned one of her team members. These were split-second decisions based on years of training and experience. Playing dress-up, as Judge Mitchell had suggested, wouldn't have identified or addressed these issues. After the delegation departed safely, Elena returned to her office to complete her incident report. Every security detail required comprehensive documentation, another aspect of her work that demanded attention to detail and professional expertise. Her phone rang as she finished typing. The caller ID showed the Community Legal Clinic. "Captain Vasquez? This is Jennifer Walsh from the Community Legal Clinic. I received your volunteer application and wanted to speak with you about our program." Jennifer's voice was warm and professional. She explained that the clinic served about 300 clients per month, handling everything from landlord disputes to traffic violations to immigration questions. Volunteers typically worked 4-hour shifts, either helping clients complete paperwork or assisting attorneys with research and case preparation. "I have to ask," Jennifer said, "what motivated someone in your position to volunteer with us? We don't often get applicants with your background." Elena explained about her court appearance and community service requirement, but also her genuine interest in understanding how the legal system affected different communities. "That's refreshing honesty," Jennifer replied. "Many volunteers come with good intentions but don't really understand the challenges our clients face. Would you be available to start this Saturday? We could use help with our weekend clinic.
Elena agreed and wrote down the address.
The clinic was located in the Riverside district, an area of the city she knew primarily through crime statistics and security briefings. She realized she had never actually visited the neighborhood except when responding to security concerns. That evening, she decided to drive through the area to familiarize herself with the location. What she saw surprised her. The neighborhood was certainly lower income, with older apartment buildings and small businesses, but it was also vibrant and alive. Families walked together on sidewalks, children played in small parks, and local businesses displayed colorful signs advertising services in multiple languages. She parked near the legal clinic and walked around the block. The clinic occupied the ground floor of a converted brownstone, with large windows and a simple sign reading Community Legal Clinic, Free Legal Assistance. Through the windows, she could see a waiting area with mismatched chairs and tables covered with legal pamphlets. As she walked back to her car, Elena reflected on the difference between her usual view of this neighborhood through security reports and intelligence briefings, and the reality of people simply living their lives. Security work necessarily focused on threats and problems, but that perspective could create blind spots about the communities being protected. Saturday arrived with unseasonable warmth for early spring. Elena dressed casually in khakis and a simple blouse, wanting to blend in rather than stand out. She arrived at the clinic 15 minutes early and was greeted by Jennifer Walsh, a woman in her 40s with graying hair and an immediately welcoming smile.
You must be Elena. I'm Jennifer. Thank you for volunteering with us.
Jennifer gave her a tour of the facility, which was larger than it appeared from outside. In addition to the main waiting area, there were 4 small offices where attorneys met with clients, a research area with legal books and computers, and a break room where volunteers could grab coffee between clients. We see all kinds of cases here, Jennifer explained. Housing disputes are probably our most common issue. Landlords who won't make necessary repairs, security deposit disputes, eviction proceedings where tenants don't understand their rights. We also handle a lot of traffic violations, small claims court preparation, and immigration questions. Elena was assigned to work with Patricia Morales, a bilingual volunteer who had been with the clinic for 3 years. Patricia was a retired school principal who brought both patience and authority to her interactions with clients.
The most important thing to remember, Patricia told Elena, is that many of our clients have never dealt with legal issues before.
What seems obvious to us might be completely foreign to them. Our job is to break things down into simple terms and help them understand their options. Their first client was Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman whose landlord was threatening eviction because she had complained about a broken heating system. Mrs. Chen spoke limited English and was clearly frightened by the legal documents she had received. Patricia conducted the interview in Mandarin while Elena took notes and looked up relevant housing codes on the computer. It became clear that Mrs. Chen had done nothing wrong, but her landlord was using intimidation tactics to avoid making expensive repairs.
What are her options? Elena asked Patricia.
We can help her file a complaint with the housing authority and prepare a response to the eviction notice.
The landlord is clearly in violation of health and safety codes.
But Mrs. Chen is scared of making her situation worse by fighting back. Elena watched as Patricia patiently explained Mrs. Chen's rights, showing her exactly which laws protected tenants in her situation.
Slowly, Mrs. Chen's fear transformed into understanding, and then, into determination to stand up for herself.
The morning continued with a steady stream of clients. Elena helped a young father understand child support calculations, assisted a college student who had received multiple traffic tickets, and worked with an immigrant family navigating the citizenship application process. Each case required careful attention to detail and genuine empathy for people facing problems that seemed overwhelming to them. Elena found herself drawing on skills she used in her Royal Guard work, analyzing complex situations, researching relevant regulations, and communicating clearly under pressure. During lunch break, she sat with Jennifer and Patricia in the small break room, reflecting on the morning's experiences.
This is much more complicated than I expected, Elena admitted. I thought legal issues would be more straightforward. Either someone broke a law or they didn't. Jennifer laughed.
That's what most people think until they actually encounter the legal system. The reality is that laws are written by people with advanced degrees and significant resources. Understanding how to navigate the system requires knowledge that most people simply don't have access to. That's what makes this work so important, Patricia added.
We're not just filling out forms.
We're giving people the tools they need to advocate for themselves in a system that can be incredibly intimidating. Elena spent the afternoon working on research for more complex cases, using legal databases to find precedents and regulations that might help clients. She discovered that her research skills, developed through years of intelligence analysis, translated well to legal work. Both required careful attention to detail, the ability to synthesize information from multiple sources, and clear communication of findings.
As the day ended, Jennifer asked Elena about her experience. It was eye-opening, Elena said honestly.
I work in security, so I usually encounter the legal system from the enforcement side. Seeing it from the perspective of people who need help understanding their rights has been valuable.
Would you be interested in continuing after you complete your community service hours? Jennifer asked.
You have good instincts for this work, and we can always use volunteers with strong research skills.
Elena found herself genuinely considering the possibility.
The work had been challenging and meaningful in ways she hadn't expected. But, more than that, it had given her a different perspective on the community she served in her professional role. As she drove home, Elena realized that Judge Mitchell's harsh words and unfair characterization of her work had inadvertently led her to something valuable. She was beginning to understand her city and its people in ways that would make her more effective in her actual job. But she also couldn't shake the feeling that the judge's dismissive attitude represented a broader misunderstanding of what public service really meant. Tomorrow she would return to coordinating security for people whose safety depended on her expertise and professionalism. The irony wasn't lost on her that some of those people might share Judge Mitchell's view that her work wasn't really important. That evening, she called Maria to tell her about the clinic experience.
It sounds like you really enjoyed it, Maria observed. Maybe this community service won't be as much of a punishment as you thought. It's definitely not what I expected, Elena replied. But I keep thinking about what the judge said. About playing dress-up and not understanding civic responsibility. The people I met today have real problems that require real solutions. They need the legal system to work fairly for them, just like they need security and protection. It's all connected.
You're starting to sound like you're planning something, Maria said with the intuition that came from years of sisterly conversations.
Elena laughed. Maybe I am.
I'm not sure what yet, but this experience is giving me ideas about how I might bridge these different worlds I'm seeing. As she prepared for bed, Elena found herself thinking about Mrs. Chen's transformation from fear to determination when she understood her rights. That moment of empowerment reminded her why she had originally chosen public service as a career. The specific role might be different, but the goal was the same, helping people feel safe and protected in their communities. She fell asleep planning her return to the clinic the following Saturday, already looking forward to learning more about this side of civic life that her professional role had never exposed her to. Judge Mitchell's attempt to diminish her work was evolving into something much more constructive than he could have imagined.